Great. So we're
Okay.
broadcasting.
All right, great. So I will officially call the Board of Education budget workshop to order and turn it over to Kevin. I know we have a couple of departments left, and we've had a few questions submitted, but we've also tasked you with what could you do if it came to reducing the budget? You know, what might some of the options be?
Great.
So however you want to organize that, we'll go with your flow.
Here's what I'd like to do. We have the central office accounts today, and if the board is comfortable, rather than do kind of a deep dive, unless there are particular areas you really want to probe, I would just ask our particular administrators to just in 2 minutes or less, high level summarize what you're trying to accomplish, and then I'd like to really use as much time as possible just to talk with you through what I'm thinking about. Ann and Marianne and I met for a couple of hours earlier today. I've been in touch with various administrators, and I have some initial thoughts, and they're not yet organized in priority order for me, but I have some initial thoughts about how we might be able to drive the total increase of the budget down. And so I'd love to have the time to just talk through that this afternoon, if that works for people. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sure I know the answer, but I just thought that I would ask. In the transportation budget, there are 2 line items for transportation in district and out of district. The code numbers are the same as they are in the special ed budget. I was hoping maybe they got double added. I'm guessing they probably didn't, but I'm just asking.
Nice try, Gretchen.
That would have solved all of our problems.
Right. Now,
they are not double added. There's in district and out of district. It could be that one needs to be changed by a number. I will double check that.
I mean, the numbers are the same. It's simply that they're in these 2 different locations under the same, like they're listed. To me, it looks like they're listed twice.
Okay,
but
I'll
the
look at that.
Code numbers are exactly the same in each budget. So I just was thinking, in the small hopes that, we have over $1 million in transportation budgets added twice, we could just call it a day.
Yeah.
Would be amazing. A final note on just information today. I did ask Kim Zima to join us. I think one of her kiddos had an allergic reaction, so she was tied up for a little bit. She said she could join us at 1:30, and I do think it's important for the board just to have a replay of some of the SEL work that she's leading across the district as we're thinking about next year. And so wherever we are when she joins, if it's okay, we'll just give her 5 minutes or so to take us through that work, just so you have the background and context for some of what we're imagining for our SEL work going forward. So with that being said, so Fran, you were at the top of our list. Do you want to just give us a very, very brief kind of 2-minute overview of what you're trying to accomplish, and then if there are particular questions, we'll just go in that order.
Sure, and thank you. The digital learning budget that's being presented and requested for next year reflects a 2.4 reduction going into the 21-22 year. We've actually accomplished quite a bit, as you know, and we've talked about since the beginning of the pandemic. Our priorities shifted quickly as we had to go from traditional to emergency learning to blended learning, and now back to on-site, but doing everything in a safe kind of way. The budget request for next year looks at what we've done this year and continues our goals with our learning management system, all the digital tools, and the professional learning as a continuity. I'm going to just highlight a couple of things within the budget that I think are really important. So the personnel costs have gone down for about 6.2%. That represents the fact that in the original plans a couple of years ago, we were renovating our LLCs. This coming year would have been Middlebrook and then the high school. With that being delayed and deferred, additional time that would have been given over to the LLC staff to do that over the summer was reduced, giving us the reduction that you see there. This particular budget also has the stipends for our instructional leaders for technology and webmasters, which have been instrumental in everything that we've been doing this past year. As we move to operating expenses, the picture is really also, again, interesting and a good story. One, we've done a tremendous amount of professional learning this year. By the time the school year started, we had done about 30 hours for all of our staff members. And we've continued doing work, train the trainer, we've done virtual conferences, we worked with Marie Alcock. We want to continue that next year, but there will be a reduction in training and conferences because of the fact that virtual sessions are less costly, that we have actually trained more people and that can actually be, carried forward. The work that's in my budget is really to continue the portrait of the graduate work, which is so important. There's an increase of about 20,000 in contracted services. That represents Gaggle, which has seen a double increase in the number of documents and files. We average about 700 to 800,000 documents a month created by students that are reviewed through our monitoring system. We also have added Schoology technical support. There's a module that we added to Naviance for career readiness. The digital resources, which is the largest part of this budget, I just want to point out that a lot of the tools that we're now using, we actually didn't even have last year. So beginning with the spring, we added things like Zoom. We did not have Zoom for video conferencing at that point. That will be continued into next year. Schoology was a much lesser contract. And we added a number of others that are probably very much known now by lots of our community members and students. Cami for annotation, Padlet, and lots of e-texts and e-books to provide what we needed. In terms of Zoom, it's being well utilized. We will continue that. We've added Remind, so our high school students can get text messages. The good story is that all of these tools are well utilized, and we've done a great analysis in terms of which are really the most important and kept those, weeded out anything that was less utilized and try to stay with the leveraged apps within the integrated system. As a last note, I do note that collection ages that we've talked about in the LLC school-based budgets have maintained from about 2005 year to 2009. Again, and we need to continue that budget going forward. That's it. We are set for next year in terms of preparedness for any innovations or opportunities that may come our way that now have been set up through our infrastructure with not only our technology, but our resources and the training and expertise that our staff have developed. So as we begin talking about what may be possible next year, we do have those systems in place.
Fran, if I may,
Yeah.
I must have a totally wrong page, summary page, because I'm looking on the page I have in my book at digital resources, account 44-237, showing nothing.
I don't.
I'll have to look at, we'll have to look at what you're looking at,
I'm
Glenn.
looking at the summary page, the first page behind the tab, media and technology, at that summary page, and it shows nothing whatsoever in digital resources, not a penny. It shows
Yeah, Glenn, do you have
Glenn,
another?
you're looking, go ahead. You're looking at the wrong summary page. There are two in that section. One is for Eric and the other one is for Fran.
all right, well, okay.
So just go two more pages in, it should be there.
So what's the first one I'm looking at then? Whose page is that?
I think it's Eric's.
Yeah, that would be mine.
That's,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
All right, so, okay.
Yeah, there should be another one in there, a couple pages in.
All All right, let me keep going then because I don't see it. I'll keep going. All right. They're all upside down in my book anyway. Part of the problem.
The whole world's upside down these days.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a page for transportation, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's in the last section under media technology. The whole section's maybe 5 pages. For Eric's summary page is first, and there's a couple of those new world things, and then there's another summary page for Fran.
I'm only using the online. I don't have a book. Were we supposed to pick up a book?
No, you can if you want.
All right,
I thought we were being more green.
So
and
Glenn and
using
I are
paper.
speaking the same language here.
yeah, I'm still trying to find the page, the summary page for, I don't know what it's.
On my PDF, it's page 376.
But my page, these pages aren't numbered.
They're not, right, the copy that Fran made for Glenn wasn't numbered, but it should be right in the back of the book. And it's like Debbie's saying, it should be technology first for about 3 pages, and then it should follow with digital resources.
All right, all right, go ahead. I'll
Great.
keep digging. All right.
So while Glenn's trying to find the page, does anyone have specific questions for Fran?
The expense for Schoology, is that in this one?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Schoology, both the actual contract, the PD, and the technical support. They're all in
It's all
different
here.
lines, but it's
Okay.
all in here. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I think I've got it. Okay, I think so.
All right,
Fran,
yeah,
is
no,
there-
thank you.
Fran, is there
Yes,
anything in your budget that is nice to have versus what we need to have to function?
I've been thinking about that question since I've heard it before with the others. And
Yeah.
the only thing I will say is that if I had to go back and look at it, it would be tweaks around the edges. Like we could reduce some licenses if we had to, but it wouldn't gain us a lot.
Okay. I'm just wondering if it comes down to everybody giving up a little bit to come up with a lot.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying is if
Yeah.
we had to go back and say, hey, look, we don't need all of those licenses for Zoom. We can do without some. It would reduce the cost, but it wouldn't be a lot.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks.
And as far as any costs that you've incurred because of COVID and because of all remote learning, none of that's budgeted for the following year. That kind of falls into a different bucket. Is that correct?
A lot of that was spent last year. And I believe that indicates in that summary that you see kind of like an uptick in the number in digital resources and books. That was because we changed all of everything that we were doing to online.
Right. But I'm wondering, the assumption is for 21, 22, it's going to go back to a quasi.
Yeah, that's why you kind of see it. It was up last year, and that was the pandemic and getting to remote. And then it comes down this year, and it's level, if not a little bit less next year.
I figured that was the case. I just wanted you to confirm it.
Fran, quickly, the difference, what is in contracted services versus the digital resources line? How are they-
Yeah, so we have some contracts that are ongoing, like for example, Gaggle, we talked about Gaggle, Naviance. We have some support contracts as well with Schoology through that.
Because that's up quite a bit. That's
Yeah.
up 45%.
Yeah, and it's up about, $20,000 based on the increases in Gaggle, the additional module in Naviance, and the Schoology tech support.
Okay.
Yep. And that was new.
Yeah.
Those were all new. Yeah.
Right, and they are, we think those are must-haves.
I mean, overall, being down is a phenomenal, that's great.
Yeah,
All right, anything
okay.
else, Fran? So, okay, Eric, 60 seconds or less on the technology.
All right. No, thank you very much for having me. For the technology budget, the 21-22 budget request is $1.937 million. That's a reduction of 4.52% or a reduction of $91,788. The increases that I have under the operating expenses, there's $500 in general supplies. It's $11,700 between general supplies, equipment repairs, and the reason those lines have gone up is because we have a lot of additional equipment we purchased this year. We have sound fields in every room. We have interactive boards in every room. We have web cameras in every room. And with the amount of equipment we have out, we need some additional funds to replace or repair the equipment that's in service. The lease we reduced this year. We really didn't want to put anything out in the classrooms that was new for the start of the year next year. So we're really looking to manage and maintain the existing equipment, make sure that we're replacing the Chromebooks that are required, because we've gone from having Chromebooks in grades 2 through 8 to having Chromebooks in K through 8 as part of the pandemic approach. And we want to continue having access to units in kindergarten and first grade for our students. So that's really the budget in a nutshell.
Eric, was any of the reduction in the lease area the fact that we pre-purchased last year, or did an early?
No, we were supposed to start the first phase of the interactive board replacement this year, and we decided to hold off on the interactive board replacements and go one more year with the existing equipment.
All right, so that's the big, okay, all right, okay, thank you.
Eric, and this goes to Fran too. I think I tried to tell you in the questions that the whole district would not have operated this year, without a really great infrastructure and the tools necessary. So your department has certainly a major crucial function this year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Anything else for Eric? Super. All right, we're moving right along here. So Chuck, do you want to give us a very brief summary of the curriculum and instruction budget?
Sure. So when you think about the district budget for instructional improvement, it's really about supporting the work that we do as a district in curriculum assessment, instruction, and professional learning. But it's important to keep in mind that most of the funding for that lies in the building budgets. But there are some instances where it's more efficient or cost effective to budget at the district level. And so, some examples of that would be mandated training for all of the staff, including the classified staff, the standardized testing budget. There are a bunch of fine and performing arts activities that are district-wide, so that's budgeted in my budget. Leadership development for all of the administrators, professional resources and memberships that cross all of the buildings, as well as the summer curriculum days. We also use this budget to cover any unanticipated costs. So for instance, if we want to pilot some curriculum materials that we find, or if some professional learning comes up that the buildings haven't budgeted, I try to cover that. And I also try to even out some of the building budget. So for example, for whatever reason, Middlebrook has budgeted significantly lower amounts for professional learning the past few years as compared to some of the other schools. So I have been trying to supplement the professional learning for that particular building. So when you look at my overall budget, there was really only one increase, and that was in the area of testing. And that's because we added the DIBELS assessment as part of the curriculum review. You've probably been hearing us talk a lot about the Heggerty and the DIBELS and how transformative that has been, but that did involve about a $10,000 increase.
I don't see that at all, Chuck. I think I'm looking at your page. I'm looking at the summary page. It shows curriculum/evaluation and testing. I'm going down to testing and evaluation supplies. I'm showing a decrease. So where's the testing that you're talking about?
I don't know what page you're looking at, Glenn. Overall, my budget did have a decrease, but it kind of got offset. So I increased professional learning, but our contractual services decreased. So, you know, for Matthew,
I'm not showing that at all. I don't know what page I've got then, because I'm not showing that at all.
So the
Kevin-
contract, your contract services is on your summary page twice. Once is
Right.
for the testing at the
Which is down.
right above the total operating. It's 8142,49627. One
Right.
is for testing and one is for curriculum. The 8211 is for more, Chuck, for the curriculum. So if I'm hearing you right, Chuck, you go up in the testing there.
I don't see the curriculum. I don't see. All right.
So
so overall, the testing budget went in 2021 from 141,000 and change to 151,700. So it's about a $10,000 difference. And that was directly because of the Hegarty and Dipples.
Well, that doesn't show on my page. Okay.
Well, we can find it for you.
Well, I'm looking at the page, the summary page, Marianne, it says enrollment. It has curriculum / evaluation and testing. The top is personnel, right?
right,
The next grouping is operating expenses.
correct.
Okay. The only thing for testing on the next.
Well, so anything with the 8142 beginning is going to be the testing category, the testing program.
Well, I think that book is cut off there. So.
Okay, so you have some lines, so I can go over it with you if you'd like. So the 8211 generally comes first. So like you see how there's two lines for training and conference?
Yes.
8142 is the first line. That's
Right.
going to be for testing.
That's down a little bit.
8211 is going to be the curriculum, and it's going to kind of mimic that all the way down with the general supplies. 8142 is the first general supplies. 8211 is going to be the second for curriculum.
Right. Okay. All right. So the first one is testing. The second. All right. Go ahead.
Yes, the first, yes.
All right. Okay.
So.
Great. I mean, so overall, not substantial changes, and the changes are reflective of the new diagnostic assessment in the lower schools.
I do have one question, and in Chuck's area, it shows in many of. What is the BOE stipend?
Which line are you looking at? Where are you seeing that?
I'm seeing it in the detail pages, not in the in the details. Under accounts, instructional leader, 4311, 40311, a $73,000 BOE stipend. And there are a number of BOE stipends that show up throughout your budgets. I don't know what they are.
I can give you a breakdown of all the stipends that we have for the district if you'd like.
Yeah, why is it show? What was it, the Board of Ed stipend? I haven't seen any stipends that we've talked about.
It's some of the instructional leader stipends are paid from the district accounts and some are paid from the school accounts. So these would be ones that Chuck is paying for from the district account. Right. But I have an itemized list of each of them. It could, like we have team leaders at the schools. We have curriculum IL.
So it's a district stipend, not a Board of Ed stipend. I mean, we're not.
Right. So we have a FAPA district IL stipend for music and for art that comes out of Chuck's budget. That's just an example of two of them.
Okay. All right. Because it shows in a number of places throughout this budget on the detailed sheets. I as a Board of Ed, I wasn't aware that we had any, that we were giving out stipends.
Okay. Yeah. It's actually part of the WEA contract. Mm-hmm. So.
Right. All right. Okay. So it's a definitional issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not getting a stipend, Glenn.
You deserve one.
I wasn't worried about getting one. I thought I was worried about paying them, giving it out.
Right. We'll send you the bill.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Chuck, thanks.
Thanks, Maria.
Yeah, Maria, not much to talk about in HR. But you've
well,
got...
I have a very small piece of the pie, so I'm happy to give a brief overview if you'd like me to or not. Take the time up to the group.
Is there anything you want to highlight? I mean, you've got no changes here.
Yeah.
Right.
Just maybe to demystify a few things, we also have a Board of Education stipend outlined, and that is our district instructional leader for emergency operations, who helps build and oversee our emergency operations plan for the district. We have in our supplies budget, $10,000 allocated for emergency operations supplies. And over the past several years, we've used that for the Go kits in the classrooms. We have plans to use them for reunification materials and also to continue our process with our emergency alert system that was just put in this year.
Yeah, I don't think the board members have a real understanding of that. So it'd be helpful if you just kind of review kind of what that was. That was part of our long-term plans here that just happened this year.
Sure. Alert system?
Yeah, the panic buttons, yep.
You know, we have worked for the past several years on improving our emergency operations efforts across the district. And one of the long-term visions that we had was to technology to help us alert members of the district to any emergency event like the need for a lockdown. And I have to acknowledge Eric Hawkinson for his tremendous support and efforts on this project, because he helped move the technology forward for us. After the committee reviewed a variety of different vendors, we settled on Alertus Technologies, which provides us with a button in each of the buildings, which will allow a person who, in the event of a lockdown, to touch the button, which will send out information across the district about the lockdown. And there are other functionalities that we haven't tapped into yet because cost is a factor. This was a big undertaking just to get the infrastructure in place, to get the communication with the town, because the other benefit of this technology is that rather than having to make a phone call or over to the police department or calling 911, the use of that alert system will also automatically communicate with the police department and emergency responders. So it's an immediate notification. It also, there's a component where they're going to be tapping into our camera system so that they can view all of our security cameras in real time and not have special access or be required special access separately. So, our plans moving forward are to continue, there are different beacons, there are different systems that we can use to help with the PA system and things like that. And so, each year we really try to chip away at that. This year we were able to make significant gains in the process, and Eric was really at the forefront of that. So I do want to acknowledge Eric for that.
Quick question, Maria.
Yes.
In the recruitment area, you have basically the same budget as this past year. The odds are that recruiting this year is going to be much, much tougher. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be any additional, or if we should be prepared for having to invest more in our recruiting efforts this year. On the radio this morning, I don't know where, I'm trying to think, it was one of the central districts in mid-state has already announced on the radio that like 63 openings or some crazy number. The news was on the radio this morning that they're trying to recruit for. You think we're adequately covered there, or is it going to be a challenge for us?
I think there are always different challenges to recruiting. And I think, this year will present some challenges just because we're not doing as much or maybe any on-site recruiting at some of these fairs. Everything's gone virtual.
Right.
The cost of those fairs hasn't necessarily changed, but we're also not spending on things like mileage reimbursement and other reimbursements for people who are traveling to these recruitment events. So, I think recruitment is different. It's always challenging in different ways, but there are also some benefits to doing the virtual recruiting, in that, sometimes you can capture different people to participate that you wouldn't otherwise, because traveling may have been an issue. And I think we've been networking as human resources professionals across the state on different things that are working well. I think the different colleges and universities and other groups that have traditionally hosted fairs in the past are trying to respond and getting the word out on different opportunities for virtual recruiting. And, I think the biggest challenge for us is just whether or not there are going to be professionals that want to come back into schools. And I think that is happening. And with, the COVID positive rates going down and vaccines becoming more widely available, I think that's going to be less of a barrier for us as we go into the spring and summer months. So we're optimistic. We also faced a number of challenges this school year when we had a number of staff members unexpectedly retire or take leaves of absence because of what was happening with the pandemic. And so I think we lost, unfortunately, a lot of valued staff members earlier this year. So we may see fewer retire at the end of this year. And we also hope to see some back who took this year as a leave of absence. In fact, we've started hearing from them. They're required to let us know by March 15th if they're going to be returning. So
I just raised a question to be aware of, because I think it's going to be a difficult year. I really do. Hopefully not, but I got a feeling it will be.
Great. And Maria, just the last thing, do you want to just give the board a quick minute on your efforts at minority teacher recruitment?
yes, so this has been a goal of ours as a district for a number of years, and it's also now becoming more of a goal at the state level, where the state is now that we have a minority teacher recruitment group at the state level. We also have one at the local level with our RESC. And we meet regularly to look at different opportunities, to think about what our messaging is, to make Wilton a welcoming place. We have a number of teacher leaders from across the district that participate in that. We're currently reviewing our profile of the teacher and our interview materials to see how we can try to recruit more for diversity and make that more of a, an intention for us as we're interviewing candidates and giving each individual candidate careful consideration. So, that's an ongoing goal. I hope to be able to report more as we get into the spring months and perhaps even into the fall after we have our fall class of 2021. But that's an ongoing effort, and we have a really great group of professionals currently within the district that are working on that.
Great, thanks, Maria.
I did want to mention that, there was a budget question about substitutes. Would the board like for me to respond to that now?
Whatever's best in the interest of time. It was probably my question. I always have a conference and training substitute question, and I think from negotiations, Glenn and I got a little sense of the illness subs.
Right.
And then I guess attached, since you mentioned retirements, are we changing the amount of staff replacement money, and where is that amount carried or shown? Or reduced, whatever.
It's on a line by itself in the budget. So I will get you the account number for it, Debbie.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I missed it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think we did. We reduced it from.
We reduced it.
400.
So just very briefly, the number of illnesses that we've had across the school year are pretty consistent with last year. And it's interesting because, this time in the year brings us to exactly when we closed last year. So when you think about an apples to apples comparison, it's exactly about the same number of months. So when you include illnesses and quarantine and other issues related to quarantine, which I all sort of lump together, we're fairly consistent with where we were last year. Our fill rate for substitutes is down, which is probably not a surprise because it's been difficult for us to get substitutes to come in. So in terms of what we're spending on substitutes, that's going to be down, apples to apples from last year. And then when we're looking at professional learning, that's also down by about 90% compared to last year. So that is where we're going to see the most significant change. The other areas are all pretty consistent for fairly different reasons. This year we had a number of staff members out, perhaps not due to illness, but due to quarantine, which we sort of lumped together in the same category, or they were caring for their own children in quarantine and things like that. Professional learning significantly down from last year and previous years.
Great, thanks, Maria.
Thanks.
Yeah, all right, so I see Kim has joined us, and so I'd like Kim to take just a few minutes and talk us through all of her various efforts she's leading around SEL and responding to students in need, trauma recovery, suicide prevention, etc. So Kim, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. So, we're looking at kind of redirecting our efforts in moving forward with potential recovery and responding to the events that happened this year. So in terms of training and really our focus there will be continue to support our mental health staff in trauma recovery, crisis intervention. So there'll be a focus on that. We also want to use QPR, which is a suicide intervention protocol for identifying and referring students. Now, we trained all our staff 6 through 12 3 years ago. But what we'd like to do is, there's a need for a refresher, certainly, and we think this is a real useful protocol for staff. So we've actually trained 2 people to be trainers in district, hoping to train a couple more. So we have in-house trainers so we can do regular refreshers each year. And then also looking at the signs of suicide, which is an evidence-based suicide prevention program, which can be embedded in our health, and our counselors can support that as well. And we're looking at doing that in grades 8 and 10. So there's a parent component, a staff component as well, and then an intervention with students. There's an educational piece to it, and then kind of a screening component to identify students that we may not know are struggling. So that's going to be the focus in terms of training priorities. And then we're looking at the universal screening and embedding that in particular transition years, and continue to do that as a early identification tool for students with behavior and social emotional risk factors as well. Which will help us also continue our work on the SRBI process, looking at the behavioral side of things. And so working with our staff to really make sure we're using evidence-based interventions and that we're progress monitoring these interventions, and continuing to kind of refine how our students maybe move from a tier 2 to a tier 3. And are we being really strategic about our interventions, especially knowing that we may see an uptick of needs amongst our students coming back in the recovery phase. And then we'll certainly continue our work around social emotional learning, using the ruler practices throughout the district, and then really beginning the work of how do we make sure that these practices and tools are embedded within the curriculum, that it's not just happening, in one location. And then how are we measuring whether our students are really gaining the skills, and then reporting out. How do we begin to report out on where students are falling based on their social emotional skills? So that's really the work ahead of us as well. And our Panorama platform, which houses our climate survey, has a whole SEL assessment piece to it. So we'll be able to expand how we use that platform to help us in progress monitoring and kind of developing more fully our social emotional learning efforts. The other piece in terms of, we continue to have our Kids in Crisis outreach position, which is funded partially through the high school and partially through my budget. That's a part-time position. And then we have money set aside for our attendance intervention position, which was something we kind of created for those students that are really having trouble coming to school or accessing their education. We foresee that some of our at-risk kids are going to have a tough time with the recovery and coming back to school. So really kind of trying to be creative about how we're going to, direct that position across the district next year, and maybe somehow, collaborating with Kids in Crisis and kind of expanding that position and merging the two. So that's on the radar as well. And then, the other piece that I think is really critical to the work, we see an increase in mental health needs, and I'm sure you're reading about it across the country. I don't know, that a couple things are at play there in terms of the depleted resources. So not only are we seeing more kids that need less resources, less effective resources out there, and just I think the impact the pandemic has had on the family structure. We're seeing families really struggling, and the needs are really complex. So the idea of increasing the social work position at the high school, I think, is going to be critical to our efforts in terms of supporting those students with additional needs, as well as those families, and helping them to stabilize so the children can access their education.
This is Kim and I have talked about this not recently, but earlier in the year, as we were working, with particular families who have children who have really acute mental health needs. They would be identified, by staff members here. We would call mobile crisis. Students would be referred in some cases to a local emergency room, and it was really at that point where we really saw kind of the major holes in the community safety net. There weren't mental health professionals, psychiatrists or the like, at the hospital in those acute care settings present to even respond to the kids. And so they were seen by generalists, and in a couple of cases, the kids were, released back to their parents and showed up in school again the following day or the day after with no care plan. And so then it fell to some of our staff to scramble and try to coordinate resources. And so working with Sarah at Social Services, working with Wilton Youth Council and some private providers, just trying to shore up locally that safety net to ensure that there are good referral resources that families can access when they're experiencing these needs. But as Kim was describing, it's a significant problem, locally, but across the state, across the country, and in the short term, the onus is going to fall to schools to try to support individual kids and families. Was that a fair summary, Kim?
Yeah, no, I think that was good. And we're finding sometimes, the providers that are out there aren't doing some of the case management work that really needs to be done. And so again, that, it falls on the schools to kind of help move the student or family forward, and we're certainly capable of doing that. But the man hours that it takes, it's a lot of balancing. So trying to meet everybody's needs and continue to work with the community and the town on making more resources, available and helping folks to understand what it is. They live with us, so we know what the needs are, right? And so helping the outside resources, how can we come together and provide more? But it's a systems issue. It's certainly not specific to Wilton.
Kim, a couple of quick questions. Recently, you presented the board with a relatively new survey program.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened with that? Where are we with that? Results come back. Are the results what we expected? Are they worse? What can you give us just a very brief update on?
Yeah, I can give you a brief update. We're in the process of, we've screened the 9th grade. A letter actually went out letting parents know today that the 9th grade is done. We're compiling the data. I think looking at the 9th grade, the results are good. I think it's not, nothing is surprising. The good news is it's identifying some kids that maybe are in treatment or are struggling with something that we might not have already known. And it's really helping us to identify some of the gen ed kids that may not have been there. But it looks good. I'm hoping we're going to see that over 10, 11, and 12. So within the next 6 to 8 weeks, we hope in the next 6 to 8 weeks we'll be wrapping it up.
Okay, great. One other quick question. What is it? You've got $78,000 in contracted services in your account. What is that?
So half of that is the kids in crisis position and the attendance intervention. Almost half of that.
And how does that fall into contract services?
Well, we
I'm
signed
sorry,
a
what was that?
contract- We signed a contract with that agency to provide
Mm-hmm.
support.
So those are outside agencies that we are contracting.
Good prices.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, thank you.
And if I could just ask a quick question,
Mhm.
do you feel that we are adequately positioned to perhaps handle, recovery come September that may not rise to the level of intervention, but may also kind of have implications for classroom learning as on a whole?
I would like to say it's so hard to predict, what that's going to look. I mean, it's so hard to predict anything. Things are changing so rapidly, and what the needs are going to be. I mean, I think that we've been doing a good job of supporting people through the hybrid and the remote. I'd like to say I think that the increase in social work is going to be really helpful to us, and I think we continue to look at our practices and how are we being most efficient to service the greater number, the most amount of kids. And we're looking at doing some more group work and offering that coming forward. So I hope that we are. We're going to have to continue to see what things look like come the fall.
Kim,
We're certainly preparing.
Yeah, one last question.
Mhm.
Your work and efforts really seem to be focused around students. How are we helping staff? Is that fall under your area or is that something different? I mean, because I have to think that our staff in many cases has needs also.
We've done a lot. I feel a portion of it falls under what I do. I think looking at kind of a three-pronged approach: students, staff, and then the families.
Okay.
So we've had several PDs dedicated to kind of staff selecting wellness workshops on a different realm of topics. We brought Silver Hill in their resiliency program recently, and staff could volunteer and take part in that. We continue to, send out resources and try to connect those who may be struggling with what resources are out there. So it's certainly a focus. I'm not sure that, we've been able to provide. Not everybody is going to take advantage of some of the workshops and some of the wellness things that we've put out. I think people address their wellness needs in a variety of ways. We hope that we're trying to kind of meet the spectrum, but we continue to look at that and be open for feedback.
Yeah, but the staff is well aware and knows of the help that's available to them if they choose to follow it, if they choose to take advantage of it. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Good.
Right. Maria's been instrumental in trying to provide support as well and programming. And so it's a shared effort for sure.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions for Kim?
Just, do you feel like you have the resources you're going to need next year to the best that you've been able to anticipate?
I feel like with what's been proposed, we do.
Okay.
I think, I hope the increase in social work goes through. I think we need that for sure. And I think we'll continue to collaborate with the town in terms of, what we can offer outside of school. That's going to be key.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kim, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. So thanks for taking the time today. So that last, just a couple of budget areas. There was a budget area for my office, not a whole lot in there, primarily salaries for Lucille, for me. There's a contracted service line, but I have to be honest with you, I'm not sure what's in that line. So Marianne would have to tell us that
I'll
line.
tell you what's in there. There's a small amount that we put aside for Cablevision in there. We also, when we do the enrollment numbers,
Right.
we contract out for that. We have a shredding service that comes into the district. There's money in there for that as well. Those are the basic things that small amount for suspension hearings if needed. But those are the items that come out of Kevin's budget under that contract service line.
Great, thanks. Is there anything in the finance office that you wanted to highlight, you or Ann wanted to highlight?
in the finance office, you're going to see the decrease, and the main decrease comes from us bringing New World in and not having the Ceridian fees that we had in the past. So that is the main savings there. The other items that fall under there are what we do with our insurance brokers with Brown and Brown. We do have the postage meters that we pay for, and the copier contract and copier print contract comes under finance.
Great, thanks. And then I think the only remaining budget area is it's labeled support services, it's facilities, and a couple of changes. One, we reduced one clerical FTE in that office, and so we had some attrition. So we reorganized and moved that person over to Miller Driscoll. That was an executive secretary, and then the only other area that's, I think, a substantial change year over year is under the contracted services line. And Marion, you can maybe walk us through what those are, but those are the contracted services for our security systems, our fire alarms, our HVAC systems. And my understanding is there were some substantial increases in some of those contracts, and we may have added a new one. I don't know if it was security solutions or if it was a different one.
So Jose would be best to speak to that, but you are correct. And in working with Jose, it's been one of those items where sometimes these expenses have resided at the school level and sometimes they're at the district level. And we're trying to bring it into the district so that we have a better handle as to what we have and how we're monitoring it.
Great, thanks.
So,
And then it doesn't necessarily show up in this line, but the boiler and AC repair in each of the buildings was showing increases. And I just wanted to let folks know those increases are driven by the cost of the new filters that we've been using per DPH guidelines. They're HEPA 13s or something, but they're about 40% more expensive than the ones we had been using.
And that's under the repairs and maintenance, correct? Of course, repairs and maintenance.
Yeah, there's a separate line. Yeah, it's boiler and AC repair on that, and that lives in each of the buildings.
So right, and in the past we never had like a specific line for AC and boilers. So we're just now trying to split that out so we can see the actual difference in the different areas and facilities of where we're spending money. Vehicles is also new for us. So we have a line item for vehicles, we have line items for the AC and boiler repairs. Now it's just getting all the expenses into the right accounts.
I don't see the vehicle line anywhere on the detail.
There should be a program for vehicles. So if you don't see, I'll let you know what that one is. I thought it was like 86.
I see vehicle maintenance, repair, vehicles, fuels, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
So it should be in its own, vehicle should be under its own program going forward.
Okay, yeah. All right. And all of the phone service falls here in total. That's the total phone bill for the system, for the district, comes in this area, correct?
No, well, no, phones is broken down into the schools and then there's a fee, a portion of it that comes into the district as well.
You've got $155,000 in telephone. Is that just purely the district telephone bill?
And I might let you speak to the phones.
The phones are, they're under carousel, and we also have an increase because when we did when we went remote, we added licenses, and that added about another $25,000, $30,000 onto the contract because we added the licenses so that the teachers could get their calls at home as opposed to using their personal cells. So we had an increase last year. We're keeping that in place right now. Yeah. But the bills there's 40 lines for each town and Board of Ed. The bills get split 50-50 on a monthly basis. And then the usage is based on the school's usage on a year's usage. And that's how it's broken down.
Okay.
So, and is that's I think a brilliant segue to the next piece of the conversation that I'd like to have, which is, where are the opportunities to reduce the total budget? Are you imagining that we might be able to revise the carousel contract down if we have everybody working?
We could if we no longer have those licenses.
Okay, and do you have a sense of what that dollar amount might be?
I can get it, but I want to say it was 20 to 30,000. We also, in this year's, well, actually this year, we also did an upgrade because we needed the upgrade to be able to get the licenses out. So we paid for an upgrade on it. That should not be going forward, but we could probably get rid of the licenses once we decide we're not doing that for the teachers remotely anymore. I'll get that dollar amount to you.
That could be really good news. All right, so are there any, just before we fully kind of change gears here, are there any other just particular budget questions or line item questions?
I think I had one earlier, and again, this may not be the time to talk about it, but the health insurance looks like there's a 6% estimate, and just wondered, is that set in stone? Is it likely to change at all before June?
There is a possibility. Currently, right now, the 6% is made up of a 6%, as we talk about every year, they do a 12-month look back, and as you can imagine, the claims aren't as high just from electives. So it's broken up between a 3% increase just from an over year-to-year increase and a 3% increase of thinking people are going to go back and have elective surgery. So that's where the 6 comes up. But as each month goes on, that can change our claims rating and can change the level of what people are going to the doctors right now. So it could change. It could go lower or it could go higher depending on what level of claims we have. And most of the areas, even the state plan is going up at 3-4% because of COVID. The rates are actually a little bit lower than expected.
Yeah, I mean, this has been on the whole kind of a good news area of our budget for a number of years because we haven't experienced those kind of percent increases that are sometimes double digit in other cases, right? So I guess just going forward, you'll update us in 30 days or so, just about whether those projections are holding.
Yeah, I'll update in about 30 days, and then what usually happens is we don't get the final rates actually till June. They get sent to HR to implement into the system for the upcoming year.
We only want the update if the rates go down, just so you know.
Oh, I was very happy to forward those ones.
Yeah. All right. So just to switch gears here and talk about some budget possibilities. Based on the conversations over the last 2 days, it seems evident that for folks, 3.92% overall increase feels high to folks. And so talking with the administrators, working with Ann and Marianne, particularly today, I'm going to just walk you through some possibilities. And then what I would propose is that, we can have some discussion now for the next hour or so on these different pieces. And then for the conversation tonight, I'm going to write it up and then you'll have a written document and we can look at it again just as we come to a shared understanding of where we want to finalize this budget. But what we talked about, Ann, Marion, and I, is what steps would we need to take to bring the budget down a full point? So moving from 3.92 to about 292. And there are several steps that we could take. Some are certainly going to sound more palatable than others. The first, and one that I would I think is a good idea, we do have the ESSER 2 funds. And so I think we have $172,000 for this year and then $172,000 for fiscal 23. So it's ultimately a 2-year grant. ESSER is a federal grant that's restricted to COVID response activities. And so there are particular specifications that we'd have to meet in order to be eligible. But 2 steps we could take is use those funds to cover the cost of the cider mill interventionist for this year and then for next year. So by this year, I mean fiscal 22 and then fiscal 23. And then also cover the cost of the additional 0.5 social worker. Both of those personnel additions would qualify under the ESSA specifications because they are adds as a result of COVID. So that would take $172,000 out of the operating budget. This next set are possible personnel reductions. And so reducing, when you look at our total budget, 80% of the total dollars lives in our personnel accounts. And so if we're going to make meaningful headway, we really have to focus there. So I would propose deferring for a year the 1.0 certified STEM coach. That position's at the high school. It's currently vacant. And so I would just defer it for a year. And so take those dollars out of the budget. Based on the enrollment and potential for a reduction in sectioning, I would also propose we reduce the total high school FTE by 1.0. And Bob and his team can, it wouldn't necessarily be a single person, but it would be sections of across disciplines. So a 0.2 here, a 0.2 there, to total a 1.0 FTE reduction. We put in between Miller Driscoll and Sutter Mill $100,000 contingency, and that was really resulting from some unknowns about what enrollment will be next year. And so what I'm proposing is that we reduce that total 100,000 to 60,000. So it's a net reduction of $40,000 in contingency funds. Currently, there is a 1.0 secretarial vacancy at Middlebrook. So what I would propose is we eliminate that position, and then we also have a 0.6 sped clerical position that works out of this office and supports Andre's office downstairs. And she does work around, gathering files for FERPA requests and things like that. And so what I would propose is to transfer that 0.6 to Middlebrook to just give them some additional clerical support so they don't experience the whole 1.0 loss. In total, that would pick up about another $100,000. And then,
Hey, Kevin, can you back up for a second?
Sure.
Can you go back to your STEM coach at the high school, and then just by each person that you're talking about, tell us what the dollar amount is?
Oh, sure.
You guys know that?
Yeah. So what I'm estimating is about $100,000, and that's
each.
Correct. For the certified positions. Yeah. And so that's we try to pick a point in the certified contract, that's about our average of where we hire, and then add benefits. And so, typically what we estimate for certified is about $100,000. Okay. So, and Ann and Marianne, if I have that wrong, you just need to correct me, but.
You have like a screen you could share with us with, even if it's like sketchy scrawl.
I don't, yeah, it's all handwritten. And so that's, tonight, I will write this up for you. So you do have a document to refer to with dollar amounts, and it'll be lined up. But just I feel a sense of urgency based on the conversations we've had, and just given the fact that the budget deliberation timeline is so compressed, I felt it important to just share this information with you. And it's certainly it's a lot, so it'll need to be repeated, just so we can fully vet it all.
I'm sorry, can I just ask real fast?
Yeah.
So it was about like $100K for the STEM coach, $100K to reduce by one the FTE in the high school, and then reducing the contingency and transferring the points, making the 0.4 kind of clerical reduction. That together is 100. So far we're about 300.
Plus the ESSER. So that's 4.
Plus the ESSER, right, 172. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, correct. Then the other two certified positions that I think we need to look at are the classroom additions that we provided this year to both Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill. So we added a 1.0 in each of those buildings. And so I think looking at class sizes, these are on my list of things to discuss, but you can estimate to, that would be an additional $100,000 each for those positions. And then moving to some of the non-personnel accounts, I would propose that we take the $60,000 that we were allocating to address the 2 bathrooms at Middlebrook out of the budget and hold off on those. And then, you know, working, as I've kind of discussed briefly before, working with Marianne and Jose and Chris Burney, we need to come back to this board with just a more complete picture of the facility needs at Middlebrook, and then a plan to address those. But in the short term, while that's coming together, that's $60,000. I would propose reducing the total digital resources line by $50,000. And to achieve that, we would not renew our license for presence learning, which Andrea's team is using to provide teletherapy. What I would ask is that Andrea and Fran get together and just come up with a plan to use our other existing tools, whether it's Schoology and Zoom, et cetera, to provide the teletherapy services that kids currently need. I would also propose reducing.
Kevin, how much is the presence learning about?
50,000.
50, okay.
Kind of next on my list here, Andrea, when she prepares her special education budget, typically reserves budget dollars in the out-of-district tuition line for 3 out-of-district placements. On average, 1 day placement costs $65,000. So I spoke to Andrea this morning and asked if there was, you know, any play in that line. And so what I would propose, reduce that by $65,000. And so Andrea's got a bumper for 2 potential outplacements. And we would just understand that this is one of those, like it is every year, one of those areas in the budget that where there is some risk, you know, because it is an unknown. Where am I here? And then we are looking at, I think, a modest reduction to training and conferences. Marion, was that $20,000 or $30,000 district-wide?
It was 20.
20. Okay. And what am
20.
What am I missing? I don't know if that gets us to the full.
We had a small reduction in equipment as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And that was also.
That was about 19.
Equipment was 19K. Yeah. Okay. And that's district-wide.
Yes.
Right. And so as of this moment, we couldn't tell people specifically what in that line would come out. We have to go back and do some refining and some further choice making. All right. Marianne, what else am I missing?
Though, as far as reductions, that is it. I have some adjustments that I would make just to the one salary that I have overstated. That is between the Middlebrook gym teacher and the high school gym teacher. So that would reduce that line. But I think you covered everything.
Right. So all in, those reductions and adjustments get us to, I think it's a full point, right? It's about 292.
We're going to come down a percentage. Yep.
288.
Can I ask just a few quick questions just off the top of my head?
By all means.
Yeah.
The reduction or the deferral of the STEM coach, does that have any direct programming implications? And how long has that position been open? And have we also had an inability to find a qualified applicant? So I'm just.
Yeah, it was vacant this year. I think it was. I don't remember, was it vacant last year too? And then we supplemented with contractual support services. You know, I mean, what we're trying to do is provide additional instructional support to our math and science teachers in those buildings. The coaching model at the high school has really, you know, up until I think probably this year, has kind of struggled to really take root. We have a humanities coach, Eric Mendelson, who is one of our English teachers, who stepped into that role and has just been, I mean, just lights out, and, you know, worth his weight in gold this year. The teachers would tell you the same thing, in getting them set up, you know, through this pandemic. And so, you know, we definitely turned a corner in terms of, I think, you know, teacher openness and support, but, you know, it's a choice. So, you know, what we're doing is, you know, we're letting go of additional in-person support for the short term here. The opportunity for in-person additional support, I should say.
That's a vacancy that you would just not fill.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Got it. And the other vacancy that you would not fill, is there another one in there? Did I miss it?
We had a resignation. It's a secretarial resignation over at Middlebrook.
Right. Okay. That's the secretary. Okay. All right. So this is a tremendous amount of work, Kevin. I think given the time, it's just important to have each board member perhaps just sort of give some initial thoughts about, you know, where, you know, just what would be acceptable, what would not be acceptable. Is it too far? Is it not far enough? Et cetera. So I don't know who wants to start with that, but you know, Kevin, I appreciate the work. And I appreciate the fact that you will by tonight, you know, have it listed out. I think if you have a strong sense of what your priorities are, this would be a good piece in the conversation to let us know. Otherwise, I'll open it up to board members' perceptions and comments.
Yeah.
So do you want to add something first?
I do. You know, I think I gave the budget that I presented is the budget I think that was going to get us there, recognizing that a 3.9 is very high for us, is high in these times. But just thinking strategically, we're coming out of a pandemic. I had intentionally left our classroom staffing kind of where it is, even in understanding that there could be potential enrollment decline. Although, you know, for me, I'm nervous about our enrollment because I don't think we have a clear picture about what we can expect for next year. So based on the best projections we had, trying to drive down the class sizes at Miller, Driscoll, and Cider Mill, even if it was only on average a kid or two, makes sense to me, understanding what the teachers have to confront in the classroom and the call that, you know, they're going to have to catch kids up and, you know, ensure that kids are, you know, meeting and exceeding grade level standards. So the Miller, Driscoll, and the Cider Mill position, I'd really be hard pressed to let go of. But, you know, I think if we're forced to make choices, those would be the last ones I'd want to let go of the list I've just presented to you. And you also need to understand, in normal times, I would have vetted this list with all of the administrators on this call, with the principals, and just given the time, you know, some of them, this is the first time they're hearing any of this information. And so I know for a fact that, you know, there are others that might have different perspectives. So, you know, that's something, you know, we'll have to come back and, you know, we'll continue to look at budget and look at opportunities for other reductions, but this is the best case for now. And those would be the last two on my list to go.
Kevin, what did we do?
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Sorry. What did we do 3 years ago when we had a third grade teacher that we added very last minute? Where did that money come from?
Yeah, we squeezed it out of the salary line, I believe. I think Marion might be.
Basically, the money comes from just freezing in certain areas of the budget and not spending it and reorganizing what your plan would be. So if there's any savings in a supply line or anything, we'll pull it from wherever we can.
Okay.
Is this going over? I mean, is there a risk? So say these two positions get cut and August, we need
I didn't hear everything that you said. I'm sorry. So
That's okay. I
It's
just,
about class size. That's your question?
yeah, I mean, if it's basically, if we have something that happens, like we need to add an additional kindergarten teacher because, you know, more people of New York have cleared out of New York and they all came and moved to Wilton and there's 5 more kids than we're expected, or how is that going to be managed? If those two.
So I think, you know, first, just by taking the 2 positions out of the budget, we're going to have to pick a grade level. My guess would be 2nd grade and 5th grade, although I'll have to work with Kathy and Jen on that. And so the class size averages would be higher on those grade levels to project. So, you know, where we were talking about, you know, 18 across the board at Miller Driscoll, it might be more like 18, and then 20 for 2nd grade. If it's, and then 5th, I have to just look at the sectioning in 5th grade. I think 5th grade was a little bit higher anyway, but, you know, we might have maybe like 19, 21 and 21 or something like that at Cider Mill. With additional students, those average class sizes go up. If we had to open another section in one of those buildings, we're still holding on to a portion of that contingency. So it's not the entire thing. It's, you know, 2/3 of it, so 60 grand. So then we'll have to go into some other budget lines, as Marianne just described, to, you know, cover that, whatever the difference may be, and paying for the full cost of that teacher. But we do have a little bit of protection in the budget in case that happens.
Okay.
Kevin, I had a quick
a
question.
lot changes at the end of each year with people leaving or staying. So when we do our budget now, we're so far usually ahead of that. When we start in October, and then in September, you know, come August, September, we might get resignations and we might be able to hire a teacher in at that lower level.
Right.
So,
Okay. Okay, Mandy, you had a question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I'm at Middlebrook in this cell zone. Can you hear me, Debbie?
Yeah, so far.
Okay, my quick question, and if you've already answered this, then just say we've already answered it and I'll catch up. The 450,000 we gave towards the mask advisors at Middlebrook and Cider Mill, what is happening to those positions, as well as the extra janitors that we had hired for this year?
Right, all of those are out of the budget. We didn't plan to include those.
Got it. And then do we have any flexibility around our contract obligations with school buses and the school food? That seems to be, I know, I mean, do we legally have to provide both those things contractually?
We do.
Okay, that's it. Oh, and the last thing, congratulations. The fact that yesterday we were at 3.9 and now we're at 2.9, that's awesome.
Well, except Mandy, we're not at 2.9 yet. We have to decide.
Right, right. Sorry that the proposal was 3.9 and now there's a 2.9 proposal. I think that's just awesome though.
Okay, I think there's a proposal that could result in a 2.9. And I guess you're starting to hear my my worries, but go ahead. I get what you're saying. So sorry about that. Gretchen, Ruth, Jen? Glenn? Anyone?
Sorry, I'm just bouncing around a little bit. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Ruth, we can hear you.
Okay. I think my initial thoughts is that I'm a little reluctant on the Cider Mill and the the Cider Mill and the Miller Driscoll teacher positions. I think it's going to be important to keep those classes sizes smaller and manageable, given, I think, some of the learning recovery and also adjustment issues for next year. I'm more inclined to kind of go the route at the high school, given the declining enrollment and the ability to perhaps maybe adjust by sectioning, you know, partial to make partial reductions, like, you know, take a 0.2 here or a 0.1 there. I would be curious to know just kind of what optically, like if we took the other reductions and kept the cider mill and Miller Driscoll teacher, kind of what percentage are we at that there? Are we at a 3.2 ask, or, I'm just curious as to, how the percentage works out that way.
Marianne, can you tabulate that?
And I also think that it would be important to know, with the taking away of the Middlebrook bathrooms, does that present us with like code issues? And is it going to perhaps have larger ramifications for what the project may look like if a year or two from now?
No, I mean, the bathrooms are dated and they need to be upgraded, but it's not going to be a different story next year. I think in terms of, total project costs, I don't know, maybe it's just materials and labor,
Okay.
For each of the staff members, whether you shift and you take from the high school or you take from one of the other schools, figure $100,000 for them. Because depending upon where they're coming in and how their benefits are playing out, you're going to be in that ballpark. So regardless of whether you take it from 0.2s and you take more 0.2s at the high school, we're still looking at $100,000 for each of those scenarios. Does that help you?
Yeah, I think we got that. Okay.
Yeah, I understand that part of it. I'm just trying to think about how reductions then play into, programming and offerings and class sizes and different needs for next year.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Gretchen, go ahead.
I have to say, I also am concerned about the Miller Driscoll and the cider mill teachers. I feel like there were so many people that were pulled out to go to private school due to the pandemic. There's always changes. The real estate market is so strong. There's still good chances that there's going to be more people moving in over the summer. So I also feel that should be the last that should be cut. I don't know enough about how you can get interns to be that person if you've got the higher numbers in those classes. I'm not sure if you pay the interns or if they're, free. No, okay.
They're not free.
And that won't work, but.
About $16,000 a year, and we have to commit to allowing them to student teach for about
The next year.
12 weeks.
Okay.
Either that one of the 2 semesters that they're student teacher interning.
But I do feel that those are probably those 2 positions I think that we should really hold on to. I also, the STEM coach, I think that's going back to our goals of trying to make sure that we've got our math. Unless there's a specific math coach that can cover what the STEM coach was going to cover, it makes me nervous to cut that role as well. I mean, I know that now we're talking $300,000+, but that's where I'm coming from. And I'm very sad about the bathrooms, but I also agree they should be cut. Still, by going to a couple of the children's theater plays and embarrassing, they all function. So anyway, that's all.
Okay, great, thanks. Glenn, do you want to add?
Well, yeah, I guess I do. The issue we face is that of the $3.2 million increase in the budget, of that number, $1.6 million of that is contractual obligations, period. Can't do anything about it. I mean, that's what it is. And that's a full 2% of the overall budget. I mean, it is what it is. It's payroll related, contractual obligations. So that leaves $1.6 million out of our increase. Of the $1.6 million other dollars that we're budgeting, a significant portion of that is also contractually driven, our school bus contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And we're just kind of picking nits and gnats to try and get it down. And I'm not sure. I am not opposed. I recognize the comments everyone's made. It's a difficult time. It's difficult for everybody. We have, I don't think we understand yet what the full impact of this recovery is going to be for us, on our students, on our staff. How far behind are we really, and what is it going to take to get us back up to speed? I'm not opposed to leaving the budget as it is totally, okay, until we get in and are able to really understand the magnitude of the problems that we're going to face next year. I think they're going to be significant. And I don't want us to underestimate that and get surprised, when we get there. I'm not opposed. I'm fine with the budget as it's presented. The Board of Finance will do their job, which they always do, okay? But we need to understand $1.6 million, half of the proposed increase is contractual obligations. There's nothing we can do about that, okay? It is what it is. We're contractually obligated on top of other contractual obligations that flow through the other budget line items, as I mentioned, transportation, et cetera, insurance, et cetera, health insurance, et cetera. I'm not even talking about that. If you add the health insurance is going up, I think you mentioned 6%, Deborah, and that's probably, hopefully that's all it's going to be. That's a big number. There are not big numbers here. I'm totally opposed to cutting the STEM coach at the high school. It's one of our focus areas. It's one of the areas that we know we are lagging in, that we're behind the 8 ball in. We've had it there for a couple, and we just, the 3.9 it's a big number. It's still lower overall than any of the other districts in our DIRG are asking for. We're still below. We've been nothing for several years now. We can't keep doing that. We've got to pay the piper at some point. And I think we're there. I mean, I think Kevin and the staff have done, over the last 5 years, an incredible job. If you look at our budget changes over the last 5 years, it's been remarkable what we've done. I mean, 2 years of nothing. And in the face of contractual obligations each of those years, no, I'm fine with it. I wouldn't change the thing right now. I'd let it go because we're going to need every penny of it. I guarantee you. Enough said.
Okay, thank you. And Jen.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite end of Glenn. I don't think anybody is surprised. Can you guys tell us, based on salary increases and insurance and I guess health insurance, and is it life insurance? Is that what the other thing is that we don't have an option to change? Yeah. Group insurance, life insurance, and salaries.
Taxes, right.
Taxes. Do you guys know, is it the 1.6 total? Or I think Glenn was even thinking maybe the group insurance is neither. Do you guys know like what that total increase is?
But yeah, $1.6 million of it is payroll, period, salary. Contractually obligated salary increases is $1.6 million of the increase. 3% on $5 million plus dollars is $1.5 million something, $1.5 million and change. Nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, contractually right now it's the way it stands before any reductions, it was 3.41% contractual. And then
right, so we're talking about next to nothing. Those are contractual obligations that we have is 3.4% of the budget.
So the other things that we put in, if I'm doing math correctly, is only 0.51.
Oh no, if you're going to break it up like that, you can't when you break it up percentages, it throws it off. So it's not going to look, it looks like it's a 5% increase on everything else because it's just compacted to that total by itself. So it's hard to look at it that way.
Okay.
No, but we do, I mean, when you look at it though, and you can correct me if I'm thinking about it wrong based on what you're asking though, but when you look at the salaries, when you look at the employee insurance and the benefits and the things that I have to pay, that's going to represent just about 80% of this budget before we even start doing anything.
Okay, that's what Kevin had said before.
Right, so I mean, that's a given. Then we have the liability insurance, which are the other contract. Now you get into the other contractual agreements that we have to pay that aren't salary driven, but we need to operate. you know, and so I have the liability insurance is like almost 1%. The utilities is 1.93%. Then we have the other contract services like the bus company and other providers, and that's going to represent 10.5%. So it varies with the different categories of the obligation.
Okay. So is 1.5.
Right. So, I mean, I could send you how I break it down for, for us just to see what's driving what, if you'd like, and it'll might help answer some of that.
I think it, for us, it helps us explain to the community what, like, there are some things we have absolutely no choice of. My fear is what, when us explaining this to the community, they're going to say, well, then cut a teacher that we don't need, or cut up, right? Our enrollment is declining, and I get the COVID and I get that there's concerns and all that, but the bottom line is our numbers are declining, and yet we're increasing teachers. And so then we're increasing, ultimately what our budget is. And I think that's where it kind of gets tricky for other people, because that's also what I've heard for years since I've lived here. People have talked about, overhead and teachers, and do we have too much for the number of students that we actually have? And Glenn, I hear you. It is. I mean, it's a tricky year on so many different levels for what all the unknowns for next year, and plus all the unknowns for our community and their financial issues at the point, at this time.
Oh, I totally understand that. I appreciate that. But historically, we have run this school district in a very conservative, very fiscally conscious way.
Yep.
I'm just concerned that we don't know what the magnitude of the issues we're going to face are. We just don't. And until we get into it, until we really begin to understand it, I would be really hesitant to do anything beyond where we are today. When you face the fact that so much of what we have in this increase in this budget is contractual obligations. There's nothing we can do about it unless, and as Kevin says, it's quite clear. The 80% of the budget is people related. Then we have to go in, and really take an axe to it and just get rid of people, period, if we want to have a big impact on our budget. Our student facing ratio is among the best in the DIRG. Okay, our pupil to student ratio. We managed this system incredibly well from a fiscal standpoint for the last 5 or 6 years. There's nothing that can be said other than that Kevin and the staff have done a remarkable job. I'm just concerned about what we're going to be facing going forward into this next year. So.
Okay. Marianne, part of I think part of what Ruth's question also was, if we were to take the reductions that Kevin suggested, but leave in the 2 teachers at Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill,
Where would you be?
Instead of the 3.92%, where would we be?
3.1.
Right. I was going to say 3.2. So
3.12.
3.02. Yeah. It's
3.
just over 3%. It's just over 3%.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, part of my concern also is that, yes, we have declining enrollment. Yeah, you go get the ball. Yes, we have declining enrollment, but we also have to think, a larger picture as to what type of, because declining enrollment does not happen, solely in one class or in one grade or in one, particular area. So as we start kind of looking forward strategically, in light of declining enrollment, what those, implications may or may not, be programmed, to our program. And I'm not quite sure that in this year of recovery, that looking at that, making those adjustments, if it's the right year. That I do think that we do need to kind of look strategically about how, as a district, we're going to confront declining enrollment, and also then our staffing, and how we then, adjust accordingly in terms of costs. but I'm a little bit reluctant to start doing that in the same year that I think we are going to be confronted with some recovery issues and learning issues that might be larger than anticipated.
Kevin, if you go, Ruth, sorry, I heard you.
No.
I get
You're
it.
good. We're good. Yeah.
If you go back to the high school and you're looking at FTEs, right? It's the only school that you can go to and take little sections away without cutting out an entire teacher, right? I mean, if we start doing that though, like what's your flexibility with the high school in terms of class sizes? Like what does that do to their class sizes if we start taking away sections?
Yeah, it depends. So the high school class sizes generally range from, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 12 kids to as many as 29. We're running, there's a world language class, and that's driven by first, the number of available staff we have by department, the number of kids who enroll in a particular course, and then, the school's ability to staff it. And so what they've done over the years kind of creatively is when they've had those kind of smaller classes, sometimes they'll double them up and a teacher will teach, 2 courses concurrently. So we see it in the arts all the time. You could have pottery 1 and pottery 2 running the exact same time, same location, 1 teacher. So I think that, on the whole, what you come to a point where if you're not able to do those things effectively, then you have to limit the choices. And this high school, one of its absolute points of pride is that it really staffs to student demand. And so, Bob does his best to kind of project out at this point of the year, but they're in the middle of, sectioning and enrolling for next year anyway. And so you'll see just very naturally, the FTE shift departmentally is based on kid demand. And so, there's a real culture around that to me, I think is worth celebrating because it really is a kid first approach. But, I think generally speaking, you limit opportunities and then you're forced with, what are the choices that you're going to cut off? And then what does that mean for kids who have to meet certain graduation requirements? Where do you do that? Is it in, as I think we were talking a little bit yesterday, do you focus on the elective areas and try to, protect the core areas? But even within that, we're still, I think, just year 2 now into a new set of graduation requirements for the state. So where it used to be 23.5 credits, now kids have to earn 25. And so I think, the high school was masterful in coming up with a plan to address that without adding significant FTE. So, these are, I don't know if that's a clear enough answer, but that's kind of the trade-off.
Yeah, I guess, okay, so we've all had to submit, right? Have all grades had to submit their, options, choices for next year? Their electives and whatnot. Like, how fast could Bob give us a really quick rundown of where we are?
By August. And I say that,
okay,
only a little bit tongue in cheek. And so again, the complexity of doing the work, because I'm not exactly sure where they begin, but oftentimes we begin with, first sectioning our special ed kids, because you have to make sure you're meeting IEP requirements and then balancing classes. So it really, they kind of do an initial run and then a second run and a third run. And it just takes a very long time.
Okay. All right, so here's my next math question. And I guess back to you, Marianne and Ann. The difference between a 2.88% and a 3.12 or whatever we think it would be, and a dollar amount to a taxpayer, what is that number?
2.88 to 312, isn't it?
2.8, and what was the other one?
Is that what we decided? It was a 2.88, and then did we think a 3.12 if we left in Miller Driscoll and Cider Mills teachers?
Yeah, so it's $200,000.
Okay.
And then what's the, well, how do you figure?
Yeah.
You have to look at average, right? Average. How does the Board of Finance calculate, an average taxpayer's average increase?
Yeah, well, if it gets into a mill rate, it's not 200,000 directly on the, it's a different way of figuring it. I mean, if you want to take it by resident, you can do that, but,
Not a huge amount though. I mean, isn't it?
no, it's not necessarily a huge amount, but, like our budget increase does not necessarily translate into a mill rate increase that equals that.
Right.
Kevin, with all these enrollment questions, have we ever thought, I mean, I think enrollment is such a key point here. And I sometimes feel like our enrollment is like throwing gum at a poster board, only just because it's so hard to calculate what the enrollment could be. Have you ever thought about doing like a school-wide survey? Like, yes or no, would you consider sending your kids? Are you looking actively into sending your kids elsewhere out of Wilton schools next year? And I know that's not concrete, but at least would give us some sort of.
Yeah, I'm not so worried about the families that send their kids out because, just based on the historical patterns, I think we can make some reasonable predictions. So for example, we know annually, we lose a handful of kids from the 8th to 9th grade year. And then, we've had, when I look back over 10 years, there were a couple of years within there where that number was, I think it was maybe 15, 16, where that number doubled. It was a real outlier. But, again, generally speaking, we see a substantial increase in the first grade numbers. And, that's typically because, we have families that redshirt kids or
right.
Gardners and 5 programs or things like that. I'm more interested in trying to figure out for this year, the families that withdrew, how many are intending to send them back. So we did survey back in November, and Lucille and I did talk about sending another survey out to those families because we didn't get a complete response. I think we had maybe 50%. But based on those responses, I think we were looking at somewhere around 50 folks who are currently withdrawn, returning their kids.
Yeah, I feel like the historical patterns I feel like a lot of people are doing things that a year ago they wouldn't have thought they would be considering doing, whether it was pulling their kids out and not returning them or pulling their kids out starting next year. I just think because of COVID, the historical patterns, my fear is that they won't be in the same pattern that they've been in.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I mean, we could certainly survey, our existing families, and that would tell us something.
Yeah, I think we should resurvey the people who left. And at this point in the year, because it is March, they ought to have some sense, perhaps better than they did in November, about what their plans are for next year.
Yeah, Deb, I mean, I think the people who left and also the people who are here, I mean, just speaking from the handful, I know a ton of people who are looking and actively sending their kids from 8th grade. And I know it's always a handful. I'm just wondering, is the 8th grade to 9th grade handful going to be more like 3 or 4 handfuls this year?
Okay.
Okay, so in the interest of time, do we send out a survey today, tomorrow, for the kids that left that are possibly coming back, and maybe look at 8th grade if those are our 2 kind of funny grades or funny groups of people?
Sure.
If you don't have time to do the entire school district?
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of time because it's a.
Well, I was thinking time in terms of Tuesday night.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly we have a survey already set up for families who withdrew. So
right. And we, what Kevin's done, as I understand it, is use Ellen Essman's projections for next year, her most recent projections, which were this fall.
Right.
It assumed none of the kids that left are going to return. And then she did her usual pattern of migration and birth rates and, transitions between the buildings, what's the typical loss, et cetera. She just applies all her regular formulas, which may or may not change, but that was the lower estimate to begin with. And then of the surveys in November, how many are returning? I think Kevin added those. So that's it. It's a pretty conservative or not, sort of enrollment projection. So adding some contingency money in case, wherever that grade may be, K5, I think is smart. just if we get surprised and we go over what an acceptable class size. But I also think it's a little different than the question of how much support do we want to add for next year that may look a little different in terms of increased staffing needs. So I am with many people who've already said this. I am loath to drop the cider mill and the Miller Driscoll teacher. I think I said this to Kevin, that my expectation is that parents will expect that when they send their kids to school next year, any bumps or bruises that they have experienced academically and perhaps to some extent socially, emotionally, they're going to want to repair those and shore those up and get attention paid. And so to do that takes a lot of diagnostic kind of information and tracking progress and individualizing and all of that. So it's a little different in my mind than the usual research question, which is a class size of 20, better than a class size of 22? And the research, is out on that. But I do think for next year, the needs are so specific that we have to target so much individual attention and individual progress monitoring that the smaller class sizes at the K-5 level, I think, are essential. And I think parents are going to expect, like, how's Johnny doing? How should he be doing? How can we catch him up? All those questions. And we don't really know, Johnny's going to have responded differently than Mary. And the teacher is going to have to figure out both of those kids and figure out a plan moving forward. And then you've got the normal stuff that should be going on. So I think the pressures of next year are unique. I don't think they're at all typical. I would never traditionally argue for the difference in class size between an 18 and a 20, but this year I will. And I just feel that's how my perspective on it. In terms of our other priorities this year, we have set math as a huge one. Our math achievement scores are not what we want. I get the STEM coach need. I don't know if we can buy it back. If we can squeeze a little bit more out of equipment and what are the other ones, digital resources, training and conferences, et cetera, because that would be the next on my list in terms of needing to keep rather than reduce. The rest of the reductions, to me, while unfortunate for next year, makes sense. And I'm not going to say that the high school one is unfortunate. I think 54 students reduced at the high school year to year is actually significant. And I'm only saying this because I used to build the darn high school schedule for like a decade. Reducing 1.0 in response to that, I don't think is overly onerous at all, nor will it severely impact, I don't think anyway, course choices, and I don't think it's going to drive class sizes. If enrollment weren't going down and you made that reduction, that would be a different story, but enrollment is going to go down. I also think the class size issue after COVID at the high school is a different question than it is at the elementary level when you're teaching the foundational stuff and the teacher has a kid for an entire day. So I don't want to say there's no harm, but I think it's a different kind of ball game. The Middlebrook bathroom, I think we've deferred Middlebrook a long time, but Kevin, I think you're right. We don't have a plan in place yet, and I'd like to see the whole plan. So, for what it's worth, we need to put the bathrooms in with everything else and figure out the best approach. And we haven't seen that yet. So I think it's premature to budget for any serious thing at Middlebrook until we know what we're doing long-term. But I think you've done tremendous work to bring it down from a 3.9. I'm not necessarily where Glenn is, where I think, we push for everything. I think the 3.9 is going to be too much for the public to accept. So I think to bring it down to the extent that we can without hurting our priorities. And you heard what I think they are, which is the COVID recovery at the K-5 level in academics, the SEL attention, and the math. So while I support many of your possible reductions. I personally can't support the Cider Mill or the Miller Driscoll one. And I'd like to find a way to keep trading off some more money from non-staff accounts to get that STEM coach. Because I think math is critical. And if there's another way around targeting math improvement at the high school without that, or instead of, I'm certainly open to that idea. So, okay, I think we've all made our comments. We have all of 4 hours to go and think about all this stuff and come back tonight. And again, the first part of tonight's meeting will be with the Board of Finance. So I will introduce it, just saying we're, welcome, et cetera. I'll intimate that we are in the middle of our budget workshops, that we recognize 3.9 is large, and that we are, sort of circling around pressure to bring that down. But I'm not going to say, what our decision is, because we haven't made any, but that we're looking at it. And then I'll let the Board of Finance add their comments, their questions, their perspectives, whatever they feel that they need to ask tonight. Again, they haven't had perhaps adequate time to send us questions in advance. So Kevin, whatever you're comfortable answering, go ahead and do that. But what you can't answer and needs more time, that's okay. And then in there, before we do that, I think Kevin should highlight the goals of the budget this year. So, and then by 8 o'clock at the latest, the Board of Finance piece, I think we can conclude that joint kind of conversation and go into this same conversation continued. So let's mull it over. Maybe we can come to, some sort of a sense of the group by tonight so that we are best prepared for Tuesday night.
Great.
Does anybody see anything or think in their mind of anything that could be on the reduction list that Kevin did not already put forward? Those are suggestions that please email Kevin or whatever. So, if there's anything not on the table that perhaps hasn't been considered, that's fine. But I do think it's important to take the direction from Kevin. And Kevin, if you could put this list together for us in roughly priority order. Sure.
And I just wanted to, Jen did send me some thinking, and I think she copied forward on it. I want to thank you for that. And some of the questions that she posed were really about things like increasing pay to play. And I guess what I would suggest, if that was something that the board wanted to contemplate, I think that's a really big and potentially controversial discussion. And so it would be my recommendation that if that was an area to target, we would do it for fiscal 23. And that way there's a lot of time for, input and all of that.
Okay, that sounds fair. Any other comments, questions, things we should think about before tonight or by tonight or during tonight?
No, it's just to clarify, the Middlebrook renovation repairs and stuff that can go away as far as I'm concerned. I agree totally until we have a comprehensive plan about what we want to do in total at that school, that we could hopefully at that point go to a bonding model, perhaps, what costs, et cetera. But that can go out. So, and as part of this year's budget, let it go. I'm fine with that. I have no.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay. All right. So, Kevin, you've given us lots to think about. And again, want to thank all the staff for the hard work and the consideration that has gone into this budget. And every year, each budget is challenging. I have to admit, this is the most creative, out of the box challenge we've had to deal with. Usually, there may be enrollments going up or enrollments going down, or the economy isn't going well, or unemployment's rising, or house sales. But I never threw in a pandemic recovery on a school budget. So it's a challenge. So. Okay.
Tonight.
That's right. So, okay. I don't hear any other comments. So we're going to be back soon enough. So see you at 7. So thanks everyone for hanging in there. Bye.
Great. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye-bye.